Greetings and salutations, listener. It is I, Eric J. Chucky, joined as always by the boy.
Hey.
This is the Two Nerds Podcast, and today we're talking about humans. I hate them.
Let's get hardcore.
This is, of course, in the context of the Dungeons and Dragons, and there's actually two funny stories leading into this podcast. We do have a lot of interesting points to talk about, but...
I got combos when I want to eat them. Tell your stories.
Yeah, I'll have me a little chat with myself. One, we were planning on going to see Shazam yesterday, but I woke up and I wasn't really feeling it, and we were going to talk things through and see what we felt like doing, and then I think the final version of the plan before everything kind of fell to shit was we were going to go out to eat and then see where we kind of felt after that.
And then a tornado.
Like Silent Hill sirens and your phone exploding and everything.
A town about 10, 15 minutes away from us.
10, 15, yeah.
It's just gone now. That's interesting. It's just not here anymore. Not a town.
There are still plenty of houses and people left, but there was a lot of destruction, and I've spoken to several people, personally and individually, who lived in that town, or still do, because their homes are just fine. But I carry the sentiment that if you happen to be from Shelby, Ohio...
oh God, now they can triangulate us.
My address is readily available on the internet. I hope things are doing well for you now.
Yeah, you know, good vibes.
Yeah. Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. I wasn't gonna go there, but since
I watch BoJack, they know what's up. It's just a BoJack reference. That's all. So the police and the government said don't
leave your house. So we didn't.
So then I was trying to remember what the hell comes next in the player's handbook. Because that's the order we've been doing this in, if that wasn't obvious. Why we skipped over things like half-elves and Dragonborn alphabetically. Because in the 5e player's handbook, it lists the major races, and then it's got a smaller section for like less commonly played races. And that's where you find your Dragonborn, your gnomes, your half-elves, and a couple of other things. And I could not for the life of me remember what the next race was. And I was like, well, let's go by all the races that are in the book. I was not near a book at the time when I was trying to figure this out. Halfling is what we left off on. Went through every letter of the alphabet and was like, geez, I guess Tiefling's next. Completely and utterly forgot about humans. And that's a little bit of, I think, what we'd like to talk about today is the forgettability of humans and preventing that. Of course, we do always want to hit the three major points we usually hit, and I'm sure the rest of these conversations will come organically as we talk about humans. But for now, the heater's going to kick on and ruin the background audio. So those of you listening with headphones, I'm sorry.
Enjoy my crunching noises up until this point when the heater will drown them out. It's crunch, motherfucker. I like combos.
Whatever. You're just the dodger of this podcast, and that's fine. I've got a bag of...
God, I am not nearly as adorable as Dodger, but I thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, well, God, so many... Anyway, I've got these Andy Cap fries sitting in front of me that I'm not eating, because I'm a professional.
I'm eating on the podcast. I'm an unprofessional bin to deal with
it. Humans. What is it that you like about humans? Book humans.
Not IRL humans.
Right. We are not talking about any preferences for or against IRL humans, which we were ironically talking about just before the podcast.
Yes. Our fellow humans, definitely. Anyway. They're on to us. So, humans in D&D are something of a contradiction. I do like the, what do you like about them, what don't you like about them, how do you use them sort of frame we have going.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to keep that frame as it regards to humans. Because I think it's actually really easy to fail to use humans well. And I actually also think sometimes failing to use them well is the right call. And I know that sounds weird, But I do, and I do want to elaborate on it. In terms of what I like about humans in the book, their stats. Let's be real.
That free feat. We literally have a standing house rule that pretty much everybody who runs games in this in our circle has adopted. That first level, you get a free feat.
Just so that everyone doesn't play variant human. Free feat is so good.
Yeah.
Even their other stat line, the standard human stat line of +1 to everything. If you roll a bunch of, odd stats, that's real fucking tempting. I've had characters I played as humans specifically to get those +1s, just to even out all my stats. And get like a huge boost to character effectiveness across the board. In terms of fluff, I don't use 5e's book fluff.
I couldn't tell you what it is.
I can tell you what it is for some races, not really for humans.
Oh yeah, specifically humans.
I think humans... I remember humans' book fluff in 4th edition was... They were supposed to be easier to tempt into doing sketchy bullshit. Like, Tempted by Darkness, I think, was one of their things. I may be misremembering, to be perfectly honest. And that's sort of my point, is that they're humans. They are... Unless you go out of your way, and I mean real far out of your fucking way, they're the default. They're the base unit to which you slap shit on top to get other races. Dwarves are humans, but short and grumpy. Elves are humans, but tall and snooty. So on and so forth. And it's really, really easy to treat them like that. In terms of, I can't think of a fluff thing I like about humans because their defaultness allows them to have enough variety that you can use a human in every situation. Anyone you're talking to, 98% chance it could be a human without sounding out of place. As a DM, I think that's their best quality.
I think humans in general work well for that. As well, I think they're good as being... And you brought up a similar point. For players, I think they're good for being the... I don't have to think too hard about this race. In the same way that, authors, especially in fiction that is targeted toward, children, for example. Or if you're trying to rope in a new group of audience members to a genre that aren't seasoned vets. You want to have that reader avatar style character who's not very complicated, whose mindset and emotional position you can kind of cotton to really easily so that the story can unfold around them and all the weird and wacky shit they get into can be explored without you having to first filter it through the hive mind of the bug people.
Yeah. Tabula rasa, the blank slate.
Yeah.
It's someone for your audience, or in this case the player, to insert their personality into. Humans are actually really good for very beginning players unless they're drawn to one of the other races. Because it allows them to sort of settle in and get used to playing D&D before they start adding stuff on top.
Yeah. I think it's a great option for someone who's not super into even fantasy in general and isn't used to, exploring these kinds of things. From even an imagining concept, like when I was a kid and I read The Hobbit, before I started playing D&D and stuff, I would pretend or I would imagine stories, of elves and dwarves and so on and so forth. If you didn't grow up reading The Hobbit, golly, you probably
didn't do that.
Probably
you didn't do that.
Yeah. So you need that in, and humans are great for that, I think.
It also goes without saying that they're available in a lot more of the gradients of the genre than most of the races. Like Aetherborn from, the Magic the Gathering expansion aren't going to be available in anything but a very high fantasy game. Whereas if you have the lowest of low George R.R. Martin shit and blood level fantasy, then you're going to be playing a human. So they are always sort of available.
The funny thing is, I often, as a designer of settings and games and stuff, wonder why I'm including humans, from a fluff perspective, from a lore perspective.
Yeah, because you often think in niches. I do the same thing. is you think of what's this race's niche? Why are they here? What's their thing? What's their hat?
Well, and there's also, like, when you're coming up with a cosmology...
Who made humans?
And why? Why... Because of the way we filter things, and I'm sorry I'm getting a little weirdly deep here. Because of the perspective we have as creators and digesters of media, human is seen as the default, as you said. You know, the dwarves are the short-bearded ones, the elves are the lithe, pointy-eared ones, but they're all human.
Most stories are written by humans.
Right. Some are written by robots.
They're great!
But, if you step back and look at it from, this pantheon of gods created this world, or this world happened on another planet, or whatever... Humans putting them in there often might seem kind of shoehorny. Why did people decide to make boring dwarves? These dwarves are tall and don't always grow beards. Not as stocky. They're alright, I guess.
These elves don't live very long. They're more hairy.
They're just shit elves.
But at the same time, if you use them right, they can be very, very positive for a second.
Sure, no, I agree. And that's me getting into my deep sort of, thinking way too hard about the situation. I don't know why when I think really hard, and I understand this is not a visual medium, but I do the Shinsuke Nakamura thing, apparently. Humans are too useful as a play tool, either for the DM or the player, to omit from your setting entirely.
Basically, yeah, they're so useful as both as I need an NPC, I don't want them to be very memorable, they need to be a functionary who moves things along. They're a human. Move the fuck along, Bill. And they're useful as a player for a character who you have a really, really well-established personality for this character going into it, and you don't want to have to try and find a race that fits that personality, because humans oftentimes, because they're so generic, and because even in D&D fluff, they're often, specifically noted in the fluff is running the gambit of personalities and types and cultures in a way that other races just don't, that it doesn't, there's not that dichotomy of most D&D races where you're either playing to or against type.
Right, there is no type, so whatever you're playing is a human. And it's funny, especially given everything I've said and that you've said and we've shared in this podcast and the previous D&D ones, but probably up until recently, my most played race was human. And not including, modern games where you're always some kind of human. No, in D&D, I've played the most humans. Me, the person who likes playing stuff that's from the weird errata books or even off-book homebrew stuff, shit I downloaded online, I've still played the most regular-ass humans, or close to it.
Him playing weird things is such a meme that I need to tell you a long-winded story about an inside joke you're not going to find funny for you to get it. There's an interview with Ron Perlman from back in the day, during the Hellboy movies. And he was talking about how he got really typecast after Beauty and the Beast, so much so that he would get a script, look at it and go, "Enter hideous freak." Yep, there's the one they want me for. That became a meme in our D&D circle of "Enter hideous freak." Oh, look, White's character.
Yeah.
And still, he's played, of all the characters he's played, it's been mostly humans. Because you're a guy who makes very, very fleshed out personalities. Mm-hmm. You make people with a lot of different aspects and a lot of contradictions. You really enjoy playing to contradictions as people.
I'm a frustratingly contradictory person myself.
And you enjoy expressing that in your gaming, which can make it very difficult to play something that isn't a human, because then you are sort of stuck navigating around the racial stuff in addition to all the other stuff you want to do with that character. It can be a challenge, so oftentimes you just default to the default. That happens a lot, and that's kind of a risk. That's not a risk. That's kind of a problem, I think, with the way humans are often utilized as the default. I like using humans as a DM, not as a player so much. I don't Ironically, I don't play a lot of humans in fantasy. I used to play nothing but human wizard. But these days I don't play a lot of them when I do play here. I'm more apt to play a robot of some type. But no, I suppose a fair amount of humans. See, even I don't remember them all.
Yeah, right? Like
they just sort of blend into the background. But I like using humans as a DM as a way of denoting the mundane. And that doesn't sound like a positive characteristic. But it is one. Because if you're the player characters, if you are the PCs of a D&D game, you are the fantastical. You are the exceptional. You are the interesting, in the Chinese sense of the word, person on screen. So using humans as an excellent as a way to denote like regular everyday folk reacting to your ridiculous bullshit is a great way to make your player characters feel special or feel watched or feel paranoid or feel anything that makes them feel like they stand out from the crowd, which is what you want your player characters to do, unless literally they're trying to blend into the crowd. And then you want them to stand out with the crowd anyway, because it's better for you as the DM. But they're an excellent tool to get an emotional reaction from your players by way of showing them through the lens of a regular person what they look like. Does that make sense?
I don't know if your summary did as well as everything else you said, but yes. It's also, that kind of leads into the what I don't like about humans. I think we've kind of graduated into that section of the race podcast.
We've kind of been filtering it through.
They are the default, and in that I'm trying not to have this conversation with myself in my head against a fictitious angry Redditor. If your party ends up being all humans, as a DM, it really takes tools out of your toy box for you to create interesting hooks. I really like playing toward, you're a this, so you know about this stuff, and you're from this region where these people are, logically speaking. You know about all this stuff. There's a phenomenon that keeps happening, and I notice it more and more as I play. That we jokingly refer to by an old Penny Arcade comic, usually about Mass Effect Swim. But it's choice paralysis, or some version of it, where you could make any character. So you kind of need a little bit of a guiding hand as to which direction is the right one. And as a DM, that reflects on things like, my player has chosen to make a human. All right, well, let's help them make their backstory. Where do they come from? Well, where do humans come from? Okay, well, the green portion of the map shows where the humans are from. You will note that the green portion is land masses. Oh, and this dot in the ocean for the sea humans, I guess. So, as a DM, it's harder to go, oh, well, clearly you're going to be from here, 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 unless you're playing against type. Instead, it's anywhere. And then your player goes, okay, but where?
I've been on the DM end of this conversation a lot. And it ends with, tell me your entire setting now.
Yeah, that's not helpful. So, like, that can get a little frustrating, especially if you've got a party that's largely human. It can be difficult to pull those lore moments, those, what makes this character special apart from what their class is, tying their backgrounds into the stories, helping develop motivations based on the race they're playing, which is easier to do if you've got maybe one or two, if it's a large party, humans. They then become that, look at all these weird races, I'm the regular guy, foil, the straight man, as it were.
Yeah.
But if everyone's a human, then everyone's the straight man, and my world is the weird thing, and I don't know that that's helpful. I'm not here to just dance for you. We dance together. That's Dungeons and Dragons.
It can be useful in certain situations, but
It requires a lot more back-end horsepower from the DM to overcome. And I would argue that most of the time, unless you're the kind of DM that does a lot of advanced interactive planning beforehand, you are not going to be prepared for it in the first few sessions, at best.
it'll take you a minute to find your footing, yeah.
Yeah.
I usually can avoid that issue because of the way I tend to help people make characters, and because I've helped you make characters for the last decade, I'm used to that sort of hang-up. So because of the setting I use, humans are from everywhere, but not every kind of human is from everywhere.
Right.
It becomes, okay, well, what kind of person are you looking to play? What culture interests you? And then we can narrow down where you're from there. Or
Yeah.
what are you looking to play in terms of mechanics? We can narrow it down from there. I have become adept at finding all possible vectors for helping someone carve out their niche in the world. But human can be a stumbling block because it just sort of takes one vector away from you. It doesn't take them all, but it does take one, and one of the big ones. Like, background is a much smaller vector for what makes you unique than the literal race you're playing.
Yeah. That is going to inform some version of your character's identity, why they think the way they do. Especially if you're playing in a vanilla setting, where the races act as they're listed as acting in book, or inclined to act as they are. Ultimately, I mean, that's a minor gripe. Humans make things difficult. They can be a little boring if there's too many of them.
I don't have that problem.
I mean, like, it's not like I throw a hissy fit and toss my toys out of the pram or something, but I still would, if my party came to me and I was like, oh, you're all humans? Are you doing a cool thing where you're like all related or friends or came from the same? No? Okay. Cool. But it makes it more difficult for me, but it's not, and me playing as a character, I'd rather, it's not necessary, but like, I don't like doubling up on races much.
You don't.
Non-humans.
You don't like doubling up on races. You don't like doubling up on classes. And unlike races, there's a very good argument to be made that that's a bad call.
Yeah.
You don't even like doubling up on backgrounds.
No, I don't. I've played in too many D&D games where a person got outshined by someone who picked their same shit.
Usually it was you, I'm going to guess.
No, it wasn't even. Sometimes I was the one outshining, and I felt like an asshole. Like, that's just a way of me eliminating problems. That has nothing to do with humans specifically. Like, I suppose if you came to me and you're all elves, that's kind of... If you're not connected in some way, how weird. Especially if you're like all high elves or something. If you're all drow. What the hell?
But because humans are the default, it's more likely to happen with humans.
Certainly, yes.
We've explored a couple different ways of trying to get around that particular problem. For instance,
and it's possible.
Yeah, in previous settings that I've DM'd, I've made humans not the default. I gave them a very specific set of lore and a very specific set of personality traits they tend towards, and then I made another race the default, the race that is most common in the setting, and I varied it by region. In some areas it was kobolds, in some areas it was gnomes, in some areas it was dwarves or elves, but humans usually weren't the default. I basically made humans, pretty much all humans were Bear Grylls in this setting.
Yeah,
they were adrenaline junkies.
Have seen some of those posts on Tumblr and other places on the internet about how humanity is scary to aliens.
I went with the humanity fuck yeah interpretation of humans, so as to give them sort of a hat to wear.
Yeah.
And there's some positives to that and some negatives. One positive is, yay, that, I don't have the bland default. But the negative is, it requires a lot more effort as a DM. It just does. Not having humanity as the default race requires a boatload more work on the back end while you're running a game.
It does, because you don't have that easy laurel of familiarity to rest on.
So you have to spend a lot more time building up the world because you don't have the human-focused infrastructure that we all expect.
Yeah.
You know, why if most people around here are kobolds, why are the doors medium-sized?
Right, exactly.
They probably wouldn't be. So on and so forth. And it all builds out from there. And it requires a lot more world building because you can't just sort of go with, all right, here's a base of humans and then we'll add stuff on top of that. I'm not saying it's worse, it's just a lot more fucking effort.
It is. I have...
Sometimes having a default is good, even if it's not... It's good to have a default, even if you'd rather not use it.
I've run settings that don't have humans as humans specifically. I've had a couple of humanoid races, and those went okay. But they went okay because every little nation was so segregated, for the most part, that every city could be flavored in that way.
Basically, you did have, quote-unquote, humans, but it was essentially the fact that they were just one more of several factions. They weren't the default. They were from here. They were from the human kingdom.
I mean, yeah, and even then they were like ice humans. But, and it went okay. I didn't really have any struggles with it. We didn't play in that setting much, but I also wasn't playing with new players or casual, as it were, players who didn't have as much of a exposure to the wild shit in D&D. And there's also something to be said for the theory that, like, you don't necessarily need to be hardcore playing, because nobody's policing that. Even in one of our games, if somebody who decided, I'm going to be a half-orc, and they were like the nicest, flower-pickingest, most aloof, snooty half-orc,
okay, sure.
fine, that's great.
Where are you from?
Yeah.
Moving on, next thing.
Yeah, whatever. That is definitely a half-orc that acts like an elf, but I doubt we'd even notice.
It's playing against type.
It is, but maybe not intentionally.
But it's a choice.
Yeah. But like I was saying, for more less experienced players, they see the look of a half-orc and go, okay, I want to play this guy because I want to be big and strong, but I want to be nice. You know?
Yeah.
You
want to be Lou Ferrigno's character from that one B movie.
Yeah, there you go. Cage something?
Cage. I think it was almost certainly it was Cage.
Yeah, there's no gaming police. You can do whatever the hell you want.
That actually is, because we've been slightly more negative than we normally would be on these sorts of podcasts, because there's a lot of challenges to doing humans well. There's no challenge in just using them, but there's a lot of challenge in using them well. Finding a good, healthy place for them in your setting. Finding a good, healthy place to use them as your character. So we've been kind of nitpicky, I'm going to be honest. But we're not the fun police.
No, and that goes for all of our podcasts. I mean, we talk a lot about what we like and what we hate, but we're talking in extremes and hypotheticals usually. Or memes. Sometimes it's just funny to pretend to be very upset about something that only kind of bothers you. I'm not real butt-ruptured about, like I said, honestly, if somebody came to me with a full party of humans, I'd be like, okay, I wouldn't want this, but it's your game, whatever, we'll figure it out. Going off what you were saying, doing humans well is difficult. I would like to lend out some praise, because the setting I think that does humans the best is Mass Effect.
Yeah, they do really well. I'll say that.
Humans have a place. They remind me of the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons place for humans, where the dwarves and the elves and even the gnomes were older races, and the humans were seen as these upstarts, which I don't know how that makes cosmological sense, but whatever.
That's a pretty classical place for humans.
It is.
They are the race of men. They are, the elves' time is fading, the dwarven kingdoms are falling.
Yeah.
Now rises Gondor. That's a very classical place for humans to play.
Sure, and I like how it plays out in Mass Effect with, them wanting political positions and them being very Bear Grylls-y about things, and the alien race is going, what in the name of what are you doing? I dig it. Like, I think they do a really good job. And I'm not saying that's what I'd want to do with a strong human faction in every setting, but it's a good place to look. That's how I feel.
It's a much more... I'd want to use that more for a sci-fi setting.
Oh, sure.
Having done that in a fantasy setting, it just works better in a sci-fi setting.
They're different for a reason.
Yeah, they're different. They focus on different tropes a lot. But, in any case, I don't really have a final wrap-up point for this. It's just sort of it's a challenge. And can be fun, but it is not exactly the easiest thing to do well.
I wish I had some wise words, but I've spent the last 20 seconds hypnotized by the movements of your mustache.
I'm moving the mustache amusingly. This isn't a visual medium. Everything's better when nerds talk about it.